A researcher once chose a path very few men would dare to walk. He spent months speaking with over 400 prostitutes. Not out of curiosity, not for shock value. He was driven by a quiet obsession to understand exactly when and why a man loses value in a woman's eyes. What he uncovered was far more unsettling than any single mistake. Most men believe desire dies because of one error, a wrong text, a bad date, a poorly chosen sentence. But that's a comforting lie. Loss of value doesn't arrive with drama, it arrives silently, slowly, almost invisibly, until one day she looks at you differently and you don't even know when it happened. Here's the brutal truth. It doesn't matter how much effort you invest. It doesn't matter how kind, present, or emotionally available you are. If you send the wrong signals, desire doesn't fade. It shuts off, instantly. And the most disturbing part, even she can't explain it. Her body reacts long before her mind catches up. Machiavelli would have understood this immediately. To him, power is never lost through great defeats, but through small gestures that expose weakness. The moment a man starts acting from need, from fear of losing, he has already begun to lose. This video is not for the man who wants to please. It is for the man who wants to understand. Because female desire, like political power, is not fair. It is not logical, it is biological. And those who don't understand the invisible rules are discarded, quietly, without explanation. Today, I'm not going to tell you how to make a woman like you. I'm going to show you the behaviors that destroy your value, even when you think you're doing everything right. Because the enemy is not your looks, not your money. The enemy is what you communicate without realizing it. Most men lose value long before rejection. They lose it in micro gestures, in poorly handled silence, in anxious energy. They lose it when they stop being a stimulus and become emotional spectators. One of the most common mistakes is early emotional overexposure. Too much interest, too fast. A woman's body reads this not as passion, but as lack of options. Desire doesn't respond to abundance. It responds to scarcity, to selectiveness, to what must be earned. Another silent killer, being too available. Instant replies, canceling plans, reshaping your life around her schedule. Subconsciously, the message is clear. I have nothing more important than you. It sounds romantic, but it signals a lack of direction. And value collapses, and the worst mistake of all, seeking validation. Asking if she likes you, fishing for reassurance, fearing the loss of her attention. That fear is louder than any words you speak. That anxious energy does not go unnoticed. It is felt, and it doesn't matter what you say. If your energy says, I need you to choose me, desire collapses. This is where Machiavelli enters. He understood that power is not begged for, it is projected. And when a man operates from insecurity, every word he speaks, no matter how logical, loses weight. Because value is not communicated through arguments. It is communicated through presence, through control, through posture. Loss of value does not always show up as direct rejection. Sometimes she simply starts ignoring you. She laughs less. She takes longer to reply. Small shifts you don't know how to interpret, but they destabilize you, and then you make another fatal mistake. You try to compensate. More messages, more effort, more attention. But that effort only proves one thing. You are desperate to recover an interest that is already evaporating, and she doesn't need to say it. She never will. Her body language, her tone, her attitude, they are screaming it. Here is the key point. Female desire is not democratic. You cannot negotiate to keep it. You cannot argue your way into it. You can only understand what activates it and what kills it. What activates it is simple. Perceived power, centered energy, emotional independence. What kills it? Neediness, anxiety, dependency, lack of inner structure. This is not about pretending to be a bad boy. It is about projecting real internal control. Because when you lose your center, you lose the game. And the problem is, most men don't even realize they've lost it. They operate from fear without calling it fear. They act from need without admitting it. And step by step, they lose value in the eyes of a woman who is biologically wired to feel it without thinking. Has it ever happened to you? A woman seems interested at first, and then suddenly she goes cold. No obvious reason. It wasn't random. At some point, you sent signals that lowered your value and you didn't know how to read them. That's the power of nonverbal communication. A tone of voice, an avoiding glance, an insecure laugh, slouched posture. All of that communicates more than 1,000 words, and her limbic system picks it up instantly. The man who constantly adapts, who reshapes himself based on her reactions, stops being a source of desire and becomes a functional figure, an emotional companion. A good guy who inspires comfort, but not fire. And the most cruel part, she may actually appreciate you, but not desire you. She can talk to you for hours, trust you with secrets, thank you for your attention, and at the same time never imagine you in her bed. Not because there is no connection, but because there is no magnetism. Machiavelli would tell you, he who seeks to be loved more than feared will end up being ignored. This is not about creating literal fear, it is about projecting an energy that commands respect. And from that, desire is born. Because respect always comes before desire. In this section, we've only scratched the surface. But if you're starting to grasp this, you're already ahead of 90% of men. What kills desire is not your essence. It is your dependence, not your personality, but your need for validation. And most important of all, it is not she who decides that you lose value. It is your silent behavior that hands it over. For several months, a social psychologist conducted one of the most uncomfortable and revealing studies ever recorded. He interviewed and observed the dynamics of more than 400 prostitutes, not out of morbid curiosity, not to judge their profession, but to understand how female desire shifts based on the energy of the men who visit them. Because even in a transactional sexual environment, desire, attraction, and value perception still operate. And what he discovered was shocking. The women charged the same, they offered the same service, but they did not respond the same way to every man. Sometimes they felt more attracted, more engaged, more connected. Why? If the service was identical, what made certain men desirable even in a paid environment? The answer is brutal, the invisible language of power. Those men were not necessarily more handsome, not taller, not richer, but they projected something different. Centered energy contained masculinity, a calm confidence that did not need explanation. Prostitutes. Wish-be women trained to interact with hundreds of men without emotional involvement reported feeling more attracted, more open, and even more respectful toward men who did not come seeking validation but came projecting control. In some cases, they even admitted feeling nervous around certain men, not from fear, but from the intensity of their presence. And the most fascinating part, these reactions were not rational, they were visceral, automatic. When the recorded sessions were analyzed, a clear pattern emerged. Men did not lose value because of what they said, but because of what they communicated without speaking. Nervous movements, collapsed posture, people-pleasing behavior, insecure jokes, all of it created a low-value perception, even while paying. One detail froze the researchers. Some workers admitted that although they pretended interest with everyone, they only genuinely felt it with certain men. And those men were not always the most attractive, not the richest, not the most talkative, they were the most centered. So what did these standout men have in common? They did not seek approval. They did not display anxiety, they maintained eye contact without trying to dominate. They moved slowly, calmly, not rushed. They behaved as if their presence alone was already enough. And this is where Machiavelli enters. He would have said, "He who controls perception controls the interaction." These men were not begging, they were positioned. Their value was not sold, it was felt. They did not explain who they were, they did not try to convince, they were the argument. And the most interesting part, many of them didn't even know it. They were not performing, they were simply that way. They had developed a strong internal structure, a core that did not need validation to exist, and that even in the most artificial environment of desire, still triggered the same biological responses, because a woman's body never fully disconnects, not even when sex is paid for. The body always responds to signals. The study also revealed something disturbing. The men who tried hardest to please were the ones who generated the least desire. The more effort they put into being nice, talkative, complimentary, the less impact they had. And that confirms one of the hardest truths a man can face. Female desire does not reward emotional effort. It rewards perceived power. One testimony said everything. There are clients who treat me like a queen, but I struggle to stay interested. And there are others who barely speak, but they make me feel observed, emotionally naked, as if they can read me. That is not coincidence. That is biology, responding to signals. And what works on prostitutes, women trained to detach from desire, works even more strongly on ordinary women. Because if they, in an environment where desire should be fake, are still vulnerable to signals of masculine power. Imagine what happens in real relationships. This experiment makes one thing clear. Male value is not defined by context. It is projected from the core. You can have money, you can have looks, but if your energy communicates insecurity, it is felt. And if your energy communicates silent dominance, that is felt too. This is not about manipulation, it is about understanding. Understanding how certain postures, gestures, attitudes activate in the female mind a response. Even she cannot explain, because when a woman says there's something about him, I don't know what it is, but I'm attracted. She is talking about this. Machiavelli did not write about dating. He did not talk about attraction or female desire. He wrote about rulers, about power, about control. But when his principles are applied to desire, they become a weapon. Because Machiavelli understood something most men still don't. Power is not what you have. Power is what you project. In The Prince, he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." This does not mean cruelty. It means inner structure. It means being perceived as someone who does not collapse under external judgment. And in the female mind, that translates into desire. A woman may love the man she admires, but she only desires the man she respects. And respect is not born from compliments, not from excessive softness. It is born from contained energy, from self-control, from the conviction of a man who walks through the world without asking permission to exist. Machiavelli observed that the most respected leaders were not the nicest ones. They were the most emotionally stable, the ones who did not react with anxiety, the ones who kept their center even in chaos. And is that not the most magnetic quality a man can possess? In the realm of desire, this is law. A woman reacts to how you react to the world. If she perceives you as easily shaken, if everything she says or does controls your emotional state, if your inner stability depends on her approval, it doesn't matter how handsome you are, you lose value. Machiavelli would say the most effective power is the one that does not need to be demonstrated, the one that is perceived, the one that radiates without explanation. And that is exactly what happens with men who trigger desire without speaking. Their presence alone is already a statement. Now ask yourself, why does this Machiavellian vision connect so deeply with female desire? Because attraction is not a surface emotion, it is an evolutionary response to internal leadership. A woman does not logically search for a strong man, her biology detects it in milliseconds. She feels it in your posture, in your voice, in your rhythm. And that feeling is not manufactured with lines or techniques. It is built through perceived value. Machiavelli would explain it like this. Men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone can see but few can touch. Translated into desire. A woman does not need to know you deeply to decide if she desires you. She only needs to perceive something she cannot explain. Presence, energy, direction. And that perception is not created by your clothes, not by your money. It is created by your internal state. Here is where most men fail. They try to build attraction through logic, through emotional explanations, through people-pleasing. But female desire is not born in the mind. It is born in the body, in the limbic system. And that system does not respond to arguments. It responds to signals. That is why if Machiavelli were alive today, he would not write dating books. He would write manuals on perception, on body language, on energetic positioning. Because for him, what mattered most was not being good, but appearing valuable. Not through deception, but through strategy. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding how human perception works. Because even if you are an honest man, hardworking, generous, if you do not project energy, dominance, and direction, her body will not register you as desirable. She may see you as safe, as reliable, but not as magnetic. Here is another key Machiavellian principle. Human nature is ungrateful. People lean more toward the one who imposes than the one who begs. Applied to desire, the more you plead, the less you provoke. The more you try to please, the deeper you sink. The more you depend on her attention, the less attention you deserve. Machiavelli also said, "Men offend sooner the one they love than the one they fear." Uncomfortable, but true. Female desire collapses when she perceives that she can dominate you emotionally, that your stability depends on her. And in that moment, without realizing it, you stop being a challenge and become an emotional tool. Do you see it? Everything Machiavelli taught about politics applies to desire, because desire is a game of hierarchy, of positioning, of silent power. And if you don't know how to play it, you end up competing with nice guy gestures, while she feels drawn to the man who isn't trying to impress her. The Machiavellian man is not cruel, he is not abusive. He is the man who does not need validation to act. He inspires respect without forcing it. He walks with a level of conviction that makes her follow even if she doesn't know why. And in the world of desire, that is an advantage few understand, and almost no one masters. Before you say your first word, you have already been evaluated. Not by what you think, not by what you plan to say, but by something older, more brutal, more honest. Your non-verbal language. A woman's body, just like yours, has evolved for thousands of years to interpret signals. It does not need logic, it does not need explanation, it only needs to observe, and in milliseconds. It decides whether you are a high-value man or a man who can be ignored. That judgment happens before you open your mouth. And here is the terrifying part. You do not fully control it, because your body does not communicate what you want. It communicates what you believe. That is the law of the hidden language of desire. Machiavelli would understand this perfectly because for him perception was everything, and body language is pure perception. This is not about being handsome, it is about what your body communicates in silence. Slouched posture, fast nervous movements, avoiding eye contact, speaking too quickly, taking up little space, uncontrolled gestures, laughing too much. All of this screams insecurity. You can say intelligent things, you can try to sound confident, but if your body is saying something else, she will know and she will feel it. On the other side, upright posture, slow breathing, eye contact without anxiety, controlled use of space, economy of movement, comfortable silence. These communicate something that cannot be faked for long. Internal power. Female desire reacts to these signals not because they are trendy, but because ancestral biology reads them as signs of genetic fitness, emotional dominance, stability. In other words, you are not seducing, you are being examined without knowing it. And the most brutal part, she is not choosing it consciously. Her body reacts before her mind processes. That is why some men generate intrigue without saying a word, and others, even after trying everything, generate nothing. A study from the University of Texas revealed that women could detect testosterone levels in men through body odor alone, even without direct contact. Another experiment in the United States showed that over 90% of first impression impact in an interaction is determined by non-verbal communication. And do you know what that means? Most men are losing the game of desire without knowing they are even playing. They try to convince with words, with gifts, with compliments. When their body has already revealed a deeper truth, they are acting from need. This part is crucial. You cannot control body language. If your internal structure is not aligned, you can practice smiling less, speaking slower, holding eye contact. But if inside you feel inferior, your body will always betray you. And this is not a curse, it is an invitation. Because body language is not a technique to fake value, it is a mirror of your inner state. And when you fix the inner state, the body changes automatically. Machiavelli said it plainly. Appearance is everything. But he was not talking about superficiality. He was talking about the art of communicating without justifying yourself. The energy you project before you speak can turn you into a sexual stimulus or an invisible zero. A woman does not need to understand what you feel. She only needs to feel something when you are near. And that feeling is created with tension, presence, pauses, the ability to hold a gaze without rushing, without discomfort, without collapsing. Many men fail here because they confuse body language with acting. They practice poses, they rehearse lines, they imitate behaviors. But the body cannot hold a mask for long. Tension exposes it. Fake language collapses because what matters is not what you do. It is from where you do it, and that from where is everything. If your energy is born from fear of not being liked, your body screams it. If your energy is born from certainty that you are valuable with or without her, that is felt too. Imagine two men entering the same room. One walks in seeking attention, looking around, smiling to please. The other walks in calm, unhurried, not looking for anything. One says, "Look at me, I'm here." The other simply is. Which one do you think awakens more desire? Here is the paradox. The more you try to create attraction through effort, the less value you project. Because attraction is not a reaction to your intention. It is a reaction to your energy, to your center. And if you have no center, if your body is saying, "Please choose me," then it doesn't matter how much you talk, you've already lost. That's why the hidden language of desire is not learned. It is cultivated. It is built from structure, from what you carry in silence. Because what you say can be ignored, but what you project cannot be hidden. When a woman begins to perceive that a man has lost value, her body reacts before her mind. She doesn't make a rational decision. She doesn't write a list of pros and cons. She simply starts to disconnect. And at first, it's subtle, almost invisible. But if you know how to read the signs, you'll see it. She no longer responds with the same energy. Her messages get shorter, colder. Her attention becomes scattered. Her interest falls like a candle running out of oxygen. This does not mean she hates you. It doesn't even mean she met someone else. It means something more basic, more animal. She no longer perceives you as a high-value stimulus. And here is the most brutal part. She doesn't fully know why. If you ask her, she might say, "I don't feel the same anymore. I need space. Something changed." But she cannot explain the biological code her body just decoded. That code does not respond to what you did yesterday. It responds to what you have been broadcasting unconsciously. Small attitudes, micro gestures, neediness disguised as kindness, lack of emotional leadership, poorly managed anxiety. And when all of that accumulates, her limbic system activates the alarm. He's not it anymore. Female reaction to low value is not hatred. It is silent withdrawal. Because desire doesn't shut off with screaming, it cools down with indifference. Machiavelli would say, "Contempt is not always expressed with words. Sometimes absence of reaction is the greatest punishment." And that is exactly what a woman does when she perceives you as weak. She shuts down. She doesn't attack you. She simply stops responding. At that moment, most men panic. They want to fix it. They try harder. They become more present, more available, more insistent. But what they don't understand is that every desperate gesture confirms their loss of value. She is not testing your patience, she is reacting to your energy. And if your reaction is anxiety, neediness, drama, you only reinforce what her body already decided. You are not the man she thought you were. This is where thousands of men collapse. They interpret silence as a communication problem, but it isn't. It is a perception problem. Because in the world of desire, perception is everything. When a man projects low value, a woman does not feel the urge to fight for the connection. She doesn't feel fire, she doesn't feel tension, she doesn't feel pull. And her brutally honest body begins to withdraw emotional investment. First attention, then interest, then intimacy, and finally respect. And when a man loses respect, desire is already dead. Here is another uncomfortable truth. A woman can love you without desiring you. She can care about you. She can even respect you as a person. But if she no longer perceives you as a biologically valuable man, she will not feel fire. She will not feel deep connection. She will not feel genuine attraction. And this destroys the male ego. Because you ask, how can she disconnect if I was there? If I treated her well? If I was loyal? If I gave everything? Here is the answer. Desire does not respond to emotional effort. It responds to signals. And if those signals communicate dependence, lack of leadership, constant need for validation, her limbic system stops seeing you as a leader and starts seeing you as an emotional burden. Machiavelli would summarize it like this: a prince who depends on the love of his people without first making them respect him will not last. Translated to female desire. If you depend on her choosing you, you lose power because you no longer act from your center. You act from fear. And a woman biologically cannot desire a man she perceives below her level of power. She may pity him. She may stay longer out of habit, out of guilt. But desire, that internal fire, is gone. And you will not bring it back with gifts, not with long texts, not with explanations. Because desire does not listen to arguments. It only responds to energy. The saddest part is that many men, instead of retreating with dignity, insist until they become invisible, and that destroys them. Because when she no longer desires you, and you stay begging for her attention, you are burying your own value in front of her eyes. The real answer is silence. Not empty silence, but silence with center, silence with structure. Becoming a man who does not need to be chosen because he has already chosen himself. Only from that place can you recover power. Only from that place can her body ever see you as an option again. Because desire is not born from kindness. It is born from respect. And respect is born from power, not power over her, power over yourself. Recovering value in the eyes of a woman who stopped desiring you is not a mission for the weak. It is not a strategy to get her love back. It is a silent war to reclaim something far more important, your center. Because what you truly lost was not her. What you lost was the perception of power you once projected. And that, as painful as it is, can be rebuilt. But never from begging, only from internal reconstruction. Most men want to be desired again without transforming. They hope she changes her mind out of nostalgia. But attraction does not work that way. Female desire does not revive through memories. It revives through new perceptions. And those perceptions are not created with speeches, not with promises. They are created with silent facts, with real presence. With a change so deep, you don't even need to announce it. Because when change is real, it is visible without words. Machiavelli would have said, lost power is only recovered through a strategic demonstration of superiority. And in love, that superiority is not over her. It is over yourself. Here is the key. Do not try to make her see you the way she once did. Become a man she has never seen before. Because what she needs is not to remember who you were. She needs to discover a man who today is impossible to ignore. And for that, you must first cut the reaction cycle. Stop looking for her. Stop justifying yourself. Stop acting as if her validation were oxygen, because as long as she feels you are orbiting her attention, her desire for you will remain dead. Silence here is not indifference. It is strategy. And that silence must be full, not empty, full of action, full of discipline, full of forward movement. Because silent stagnation is just waiting. But silent evolution is power incubating. Rebuilding value begins when you become a man who does not need to be loved to feel valuable. Because true attraction is not born from the desire to be accepted. It is born from certainty in your own transformation. What does that transformation look like? It starts with the physical. A strong body, upright posture, high vital energy, not for aesthetics, but because the body is the first language of power. A weak body communicates vulnerability. A solid body communicates dominance. Then the emotional, cutting emotional dependency, stopping reaction to highs and lows, not chasing, not begging, learning to hold uncertainty without collapsing. That is pure magnetism. And then the psychological, having a purpose bigger than her, an internal mission that does not move based on external approval. When a man has direction, he automatically projects value. Because masculine energy is not defined by what it conquers, but by what it sustains. The most common mistake, thinking improvement is a strategy to get her back. No, improvement is a strategy to never again become the man who loses himself. If she returns, she should not find the same you waiting with open arms. She should collide with an energy that does not need her attention, but attracts her like a magnet. Not through manipulation, through authentic transformation. And if she never returns, it doesn't matter. Because rebuilding value was never for her. It was always for you. So that you never again kneel emotionally before anyone, so that you never again become the man who collapses when he is not chosen. Machiavelli would explain it like this. A prince should not concern himself with being liked by the people, but with the respect his presence inspires. In the game of desire, that means this. You don't need to be loved first. You need to be perceived as unbreakable. And being unbreakable does not mean being cold. It means having an internal structure so solid that no rejection can make you lose posture. There is something deeply attractive about a man who does not become unstable. Someone who does not shatter even when it hurts. Who feels but does not collapse. Who acknowledges rejection but does not turn it into trauma. He turns it into fire. Fire that transforms. Fire that pushes. Fire that elevates. Because when a man rebuilds his value through pain, he does not return as the same man. He returns as someone who does not need to return. And that is irresistible. You do not need to show anyone your evolution. You only need to sustain it. Because consistent presence, visible progress, and strategic detachment create an energy no woman can ignore. And if one day she comes back, you will not receive her with anxiety. You will receive her with calm because you are no longer waiting. You are choosing. And if she does not meet your new standard, then she is no longer an option. That is the real comeback. Not the man who seeks approval, but the man who no longer needs it. The man who does not ask for attention. The man who became the source of his own value. True power is not in what you say. It is in what you project without speaking. And that is what men who awaken genuine desire have learned to master. This is not about learning techniques, not lines, not psychological games. It is about becoming someone who emits value without explanation. Because the most powerful signals are not visible. They are felt. Your body language, your energy, your silence, your decisions, everything communicates something. And a woman, even if she cannot put it into words, picks it up in milliseconds. She is not searching for logic. She is searching for presence. A presence that makes her feel she is standing in front of a man who does not depend on her approval, who does not need to beg, convince, or compete. A man who is desired because he chose himself first. That is not achieved by pretending, it is achieved by building. And that construction happens every day in what you do when nobody is watching. In how you talk to yourself, in how you face rejection, in how you hold your center even when the world shakes. Desire is not born from perfection, it is born from congruence. From a man who does not need to hide his wounds because he has already transformed them into power. From a man who can approach without fear because he is not waiting to be saved by her attention. Machiavelli would have said, "He who controls appearances controls perception, and he who controls perception rules without raising his voice." Applied to desire. That means this: if you learn to control what you project, you will never again have to beg for what you deserve. And here is the conclusion: you don't need more tricks. You need more presence, more direction, more internal fire. Because desire is not requested, it is provoked, and respect is not begged for. It is imposed without violence through energy. If you learned something from this video, do not forget it. What you emit without speaking determines whether you are desired or ignored. Subscribe if you want to learn more hidden codes of desire and power. Share this video if you know someone who needs to wake up. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. You only have to be impossible to ignore.